City of Stevens Point Sustainability Commission meeting, recorded May 1st, 2025.
I love this, Allison.
We will call the Sustainability Commission meeting to order. 'Cause it's 5:31, so we'll do that. First agenda item, roll call. If you're here, say your name.
I can take it.
Okay.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Sam Lane,
Here.
Allison Burr,
Here.
Heather Phelps,
Here.
Rob McKitch is absent. Is he excused or just absent? You know,
I-
do not know if he,
we can check in on that.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Doug Stingle,
Here.
and we know that Greg is excused.
Yes.
yes.
Five present.
Okay. Perfect. Sounds good. Second agenda item is selection of a temporary meeting chair. I'll just nominate myself, I guess.
I will second that nomination.
Great. Any other nominations? Do we do it like this? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing and seeing none, I suggest, or I move that we close nominations
Cast
and
Agreed.
cast a unanimous vote for Allison Burr as a temporary chair. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yay. Any opposed? That's what I thought. No, just kidding. Okay. Agenda item number 3, persons who wish to address the Sustainability Commission on a specific agenda item must register their request at this time. Sammy, would you like to talk?
No, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other ones, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is persons who wish to address the Sustainability Commission on a non-specific agenda item must register with a request at this time. Same thing. Okay. Agenda item number 5 is a report of the April 3rd, 2025 meeting of the Sustainability Commission. Ooh, I don't know who was going to be giving that. I guess last month we had.
accepting of the minutes, is that kind of what that is? Since I have the copies.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
What we're doing?
Yeah.
I guess just a recap from last month. We had Adam Kuhn, the Associate Planner, Zoning Administrator for the city, present to us. He spoke on the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition, the Wisconsin DNR Green Tier Legacy Communities Program, and the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin's Energy Innovation Grant Program.
All right. I move to accept the minutes.
Yeah.
If that is functionally what we were doing here.
I would
think.
move to, actually, if I'd second it and move to have a friendly amendment. There's no E at the end of my last name.
Ha!
It's all.
Oh. Where is that?
Yeah, where was that, Sam?
It was in the minutes in the email that I got.
Oh, it was, okay.
If it's in the packet email.
I say, I don't know if I see a misspelling in the packet.
It
Okay.
looks to
It
me
might have got
like
corrected before, yes.
it might have gotten corrected.
Okay. Perfect, okay, and then we'll need a second for the
Sam did.
minutes. Okay, perfect. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and that passes. And then agenda item number 6 would be the presentation by Joel Lemke, the Director of Public Utilities Department, Operations Overview and Efforts to Reduce Greenhouse Gases and Adaptations to Climate Change. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Would you like me to be up there, or since I'm driving this, is it all right if I'm
Yeah,
there?
that's
That's
You're
perfectly
good
fine.
there.
Real good, okay. So, there's a number of different opportunities I've had to present this. Okay, that didn't work. She got
oops.
They were.
There.
There we go.
Let me I'll just leave it on this screen.
There you
How
go.
about? Okay.
Don't move.
I do recall now that I did that it generally doesn't work well when you do the slideshow. So there's been portions of this I've had the opportunity to present to all sorts of different groups. So it might go in and out of the exact agended item here.
Sure.
But that's why, if there's something I hit on that I don't go deep enough into, let me know. And similarly, if I'm getting into something you don't want me to, just give me the hook. So, sustainability. Really, to us, over the years, our goals and actions have really come down to us determining that sustainability for us is really providing essential services to our community while we maximize the use of finances, natural resources, and staff expertise. So I know that this sustainability committee might, on the surface, definitely lean towards all the greenhouse gas stuff and everything like that. I just, as a operation, we definitely highlight financial and staff expertise as well, because we have to, really. What that means to us is that our projects are done through the lens of sustainability. We don't do engineering, we don't do construction, we don't reinvent, we don't redesign without keeping that in mind. All the projects are based on financial decisions as well. You'll see later on, I can show a slide where we got our treatment plant to net zero nearly with electric, and then it skyrocketed back up, not because we weren't still making efforts, but because we had changed our focus to be using our biogas for heat rather than power, right? So there's just some context there to keep in mind. This is kind of a list, high-level list, not exhaustive list of things we've done for a little over 20 years. Everybody's familiar with energy audits. That's kind of where it begins. Energy efficiency and conservation projects kind of took off between 03 and 11, and I'll get into some of those. 2012 was our first really big step. However, I will highlight the fact that without the basic conservation projects to kind of bring our total demand for things like electric, our utilization of gas, the overlapping of different equipment at one time, just from operational kind of habits. Without that, 2012 would have been a lot harder, because in 2012 we started utilizing the methane production off the treatment plant, and I'll get into that. So then the PPP with the brewery is the high strength waste project. More info on that. We lined sewers, we did solar at the utility garage, did a dewatering project, purchased the first EV in city fleet, and we're right now, as we speak, getting more e-gauge monitoring out, and I will tell you what that is too. So, I think that this is easy to overlook because it's so long ago for us, but there's a fair amount of potential for this to have been missed by operations, this energy audit. We've been through a couple of things in the past that you guys might not be aware of. We've got volumes of information on it, but a type of energy audit, in a way, was us being approached by folks like Johnson Controls, Siemens, Honeywell, back when there was a big push for, I'm going to forget the name of it now. It's a financing mechanism to do energy, to do basically sustainability projects. What's that called? Performance-based contracting.
Yes.
So, if you can show that putting in a $20,000, replacement motor on a huge pump is going to save you $25,000 over 5 years, and you want to finance it over 5 years, performance-based contracting was a statutory loophole, kind of, if you will, to financing something and getting it done kind of outside the traditional procurement methods. So we went through that back 10, 15 years ago. So we've had a lot of kind of experience as a city with looking down the different paths of, how do we do this? How do we take the next step? Because to be honest with you, what we found in that process where we were talking to these enormous companies is the low-hanging fruit was gone, right? We'd done all those projects. We've done all the obvious stuff, and now we're getting into more complex, more, data-driven, more, this is gonna take some effort, more of the return is lower, that kind of thing. So we're kind of past the easy part. I will say, and one thing that is in here still from maybe previous presentations, is that people really are still not fully utilizing Focus on Energy grade program. We've gotten nearly $500,000 from them.
Nice.
How much is that?
About $500,000. Yeah, over the course of the projects I'm telling you here, it was, around 5 or maybe over. So a lot of my stuff focuses on the utilities, and that's partially because the thread of my involvement with the city has been mostly utilities based or related. But it's also because utilities are such huge consumers of, resources, power, gas, everything. So, these are some of the things we did in the 03 to 11 timeframe, and it really has to do with smarter operation. DO in here, we're referring to dissolved oxygen in our aeration basins. Turning that down because you can is just a smart thing, because the more oxygen you throw in aeration, the more you have to turn on electric consuming motors and run them at higher speed. So it's just really about the culture, right? The operating culture of your staff and what they're doing. We put in smaller motors. We put in these scroll compressors that took our aeration supply from 150 horse motors down to 70, and some fine bubble technology. That's probably a long conversation, but and this is what I was talking about with some of the culture-based stuff. You start programming things so that if operationally you know that you need to switch from this 100 horse motor to this 100 horse motor, shut the first one off before you turn the second one on. That seems ridiculously simple. It's not all that logical in some operations, because sometimes you want to make sure the other one's going to run before you turn one off, right? But it makes your demand spike through the roof and results in high bills. And so there's a lot of just kind of, hey, we got to tell each other, remind each other, don't do that, that kind of thing. So this is, again, getting past the low-hanging fruit type stuff. Equipment upgrades, aeration blowers, UV light system. We actually just did another UV light system upgrade because we needed more power. So because that was a regulatory thing, we didn't have an opportunity to save energy. We needed to get more disinfection. Linear motion mixing in anaerobic digestion tank. This is a really low energy thing. It's really cool. A lot of times in a in a digester, you're mixing it with basically jet pumps. So they're moving the liquid around in there through a nozzle and making the whole thing just churn like that. Linear motion is a very low energy. It's like a giant butter churn. It just moves like, about 1.5 feet. And just kind of sits there and pumps. Does a great job. I think there's a 5-horse motor on that, hardly anything. We do use heat pumps all over wastewater and the utility garage across the street. We have several buildings where we use our heating, or our methane to heat buildings. And not only that, we use our effluent water as a heat sink in place of like what would be a geothermal loop. We use our effluent water in several buildings for that kind of heat. In fact, the entire utility garage, the new garage across the street from my office, is in floor heat with that effluent water as a heat sink.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. And then biogas, of course, gets utilized everywhere. We burn as much as we can of that. So in 2012, when we put in our cogen unit to burn methane, we installed a 180 kW generator. It's essentially a big tractor engine. It's a man tractor engine. That ran for years. I think we had 40,000 hours on it the first time it blew up. We got to a point where like I said, we went, and I think there's a graph coming up here. This is over years. If that's too small, 2002 is far on the left. That hard dip right here is 2013. So this is a 225 kilowatt demand, and this is, getting down to under 20. So that's what happened after we installed this equipment. This equipment treated our digester gas, our methane gas. It removed hydrogen sulfide, removed siloxanes, all which damage engines quickly, in order to create that 180 kW power pretty much steady. And you can see it was very impactful. 98% decrease in annual net electric consumed from 2002 to 2014. And that's great. And then you see the line go back up because we started using this gas for things other than electricity because it made sense, right? We're going to put our money somewhere, and we're going to use that methane resource somewhere. This graph shows us using it somewhere else, right? So it's still being utilized and very efficiently utilized.
So are you not using any methane for electricity production any longer, or is it just mostly heat but some electricity?
That's correct. This unit right here, which is in the lower right picture, that is the cabinet that has the man engine in it. That is in pieces.
Okay.
After its third, catastrophic failure, we, at about the same time, we were bringing our Class A biosolids process online. Drying biosolids to Class A quality is very energy intensive, and so we're using our methane for heat for that.
Okay.
We may sometime in the future reinvest in something that produces power again if we feel we've got excess gas and it makes sense, but we might look a different way, because this is directly burning the methane. Even though we clean it, it burns it directly through the engine. So my hope would be that we could find something that runs a steam-driven microturbine or something.
Okay.
So that the dirty part of the operation is just boiling water and the clean part is running a turbine, something like that. We had an opportunity, well, it wasn't so much an opportunity as much as it was a necessity. Back in 2015, Stevens Point Brewery, which is a great thing, had really increased their output. They, in fact, doubled twice in about the 8 years prior to 2015. And so one of the other things, because getting to kind of the finer points of wastewater treatment, the expensive part of treating wastewater is aeration. So all the wastewater in the city comes to the head of the plant. You go through primaries, which is just settling and floating, a real rudimentary system. After that, you go to aeration. Aeration is where we start doing our biologic phosphorus after aeration. After BioP is where we do aeration, but nonetheless, in aeration, it's bubbles. That's what it sounds like. We're adding air to the basins, and it's an incredibly energy-intensive process. So the less we have to treat through aeration, in other words, the less food we send the treatment plant, the less air we have to put into it. So in 2015, we did a project with the brewery where we built a tank in their basement, put in 2 air diaphragm operated pumps, basically acting as a lift station, and force main from that tank to our wastewater treatment plant. The whole point there is that waste is high strength, and it's high strength enough to not send it through aeration, to put it right into digestion. But you can't put all your waste into digestion because it's too thin, it's too watered down. So your domestic waste that just comes through the sewers, like household, it's very watery. This stuff is not watery. And so when we put it right into digestion, it makes gas like crazy. And so we proposed this project. It was a $1.2 million project. They paid half of it. And really, the gains there is that we didn't have to do a treatment plant upgrade because we could handle the waste then. They don't have to pay surcharges because when you send high strength down the sewer, if you're a facility like that, we're going to sample it randomly and we're gonna make you pay for that high-strength waste because it charges us more to treat it. So they don't pay surcharges on their high strength because it does not go to a part of the treatment plant that is expensive to treat. So they get to brew beer really cheap, which is a great thing for them. Great thing for us is that we get to treat it really cheap. So it's kind of a win-win. This is the path that it goes on. So it's only 3,700 feet away. It goes straight away from the plant, goes down the Schrader Connection Trail there, and then east to the brewery. So it's just kind of convenient how close they're located to the treatment plant's in the west end of that line, the brewery's on the east end of that line.
Nice.
And at that time, the west end of that line, you can see those little circles there. This is a blow up of that. That round tank is the top of that is at grade. It's ground level. That's where not only does the brewery waste get pumped, but where we take high strength waste received in right up where the driveway crosses in front of it. Septage, grease haulers, high strength waste from food processing, that kind of thing. We take in about 30,000 gallons a day. It's a 40,000 gallon tank, so we're going through it pretty quick. And we feed that, can you see my cursor kind of?
Yep.
Yes.
So these 3 tanks here are digesters, and then in 2018, we converted this one to a digester, the big black cover. That used to be the same as this one, sludge storage, but we converted it to a digester when we did our Class A biosolids upgrade. We didn't need as much sludge storage then. So now we have a ton of digestion space. And this, for future reference, is our Class A dryer building. Some other things we've done. Lining of sewers. It's not very obvious, but when you get to the west side of town, you go down a few feet, it's very wet. Because it's wet, that if you have cracks in your sewers, if you have joints that are pulled apart, if you have bad connections at manholes, groundwater gets into your sewers. When groundwater gets into your sewers, if that sewer happens to be upstream of a lift station, you end up pumping clean groundwater. You end up sending clear water to your treatment plant and treating clear groundwater. And you end up having to oversize your treatment plant because you're treating more clean groundwater, right? And so anytime we can seal those sewers up and ensure that we are only conveying and treating wastewater, we're doing well. In fact, speaking of Focus on Energy, I bugged them about 3 or 4 years in a row that they should be giving grants for lining sewers. And on the 4th or 5th year, I got a call, said, "Good news, Joel, we got a grant for that." And I said, "I just got done lining them." So I hope other people are taking advantage of that.
Will you also at some point be talking about stormwater management methods? Because I know that in some places those go through sewers, and in some places they...
We do not, I can touch on that really quick right now. We don't have any combined sewers in Stevens Point. Some older cities, they're usually old and large, right? So it's to the
Milwaukee.
point. Milwaukee, Chicago, New York. They've all been going through, Boston, they've all been going through huge projects in the last decade and plus to separate storm and sanitary. And every time you get a big storm event and you have a sanitary sewer overflow event, that's a reportable event. And there's public health impacts to that. You can make people sick if you're sending that to waterways that people use for recreation or drinking water or whatever. So we don't have any of those combined sewers, thankfully. We did a long time ago. There's a couple manholes that still are in the city where you can see the pipe going through the bottom of the manhole, and then up top there's leads that are mudded off, they're concrete shut, where in that part of the city they didn't have both sewers, so they sent the stormwater to the sanitary sewer. But that was probably 80 years ago. But very few of those ever existed, and they don't exist anymore. So thankfully we don't intentionally treat clear water. You still do get some, I guess we'll call it illicit discharge, where somebody who might not have the option of where to run a sump pump runs it to like a floor drain or a laundry sink or something like that. You're not supposed to do that. But there are difficult situations that lead people to thinking there isn't another option. A lot of people run them in their yards, but then what happens when the ground freezes in the winter if you're still pumping? So that's actually why on the north side of town and western, as you get closer to the river, when we do our reconstruction projects, we put storm laterals into every house.
Oh, wow.
So that if we end up having a problem, we can say, there's a lateral there, connect to it, you know? And because you got to give people an option. You got to give them a resource. You got to say, this is easy. You got to dig a trench from here to here, connect to that pipe, and you're good to go. Because there's several situations where we have some pumps draining over sidewalks or pumping into a person's backyard and then overflowing into their neighbor's backyard, and that's not cool, you know? So we're slowly over time generating, you know, a mechanism of taking care of that through our projects. Utility garage, solar, and heat pump. So on this, our newest facility, I think it's probably on this picture. Oh, no, it's just off this picture. Here it is. This facility, which for reference on the it is west, but the left side of this photo, you'll see the water department office there, just for context, the small building over here. So this is our new utility garage. We run our effluent water from this facility here. This is where our UV hits our final effluent before it goes to the river. We take water from there and we put it in this tank. This tank is one we retasked from decades ago. In fact, it was covered with grass like this one until 2018. It's called a squircle. Square on top, circle on the bottom. I like that.
All right.
Squircle. So we reuse this squircle as a buffering tank for our effluent water, and we send that effluent water to this building, and this building is basically electric heat. Because we take that effluent, we extract the heat out of it through heat pumps, and we use the effluent water as we go through a heat exchanger to use it as that heat sink as we're chilling the closed loop side of it. So the reason we put the solar on the roof is because since it's all electric heat, we're trying to offset our electric demand to the grid with this solar system, and it is, I think, rated at 131. We don't get that out of it because you can see those panels are very flat. They're ballasted on the roof. They're not mechanically attached. They're just weighed down. So here's one of the, this is what we're looking to set up at our other facilities. But this gauge is actually a really user-friendly way to give you a sense of how you're doing when you have, well, even if you don't have any renewables to monitor, you'd still have the red line. So when it's shaded green, we're net exporting, and when it's shaded red, we're consuming off the grid. So you can see the red line near the bottom. That's our building demand. And when it goes flat here, that's overnight. These peaks are obviously daytime peaks. This is noon up here. This is midnight down here type thing. This is a clear day. This is a not so clear day, right? And funny enough, there's a consistent dip here. That's actually the shadow of the water tower hitting these solar panels. Yeah. These three spikes here are actually our 3 air exchanges in the building that are scheduled. So we scheduled those during the sun hours. So this is a really nice tool. We've just installed wiring to get data very near our main electric panels in 4 more facilities. So I'm looking forward to those coming online quick.
E-gauge, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. My work helps schools get these sometimes so that
Nice.
the schools can track their electric usage.
Yeah, you don't know till you know, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a really good visual representation of it that is hard to, you can't comprehend when you look at an electric bill.
Right.
Right. Well, and so what's interesting here is you see how neat these two are? Those little peaks down there, those 3 peaks, they're very easy to understand. We have big fans kicking on, and that's why the demand goes up. But that's a Saturday and a Sunday.
Yep.
That's why they're so clean. Here we have other things going on. People, using the pressure washer, going in and out of areas that have motion detection lighting, putting garage doors up and down, everything like that. So that's why these are messier than these because it's a weekday stuff. So yeah, those are really, really helpful. So in 2019, yet another project here, and this gets more into a different side of sustainability for us. Our biosolids project took our Class B solids and turned them into Class A solids. So we used to land apply a Class B. There's about 2.5% solids. I know that's a weird number. When you think 2.5% solids, think of dirty drain oil. Like if you change oil in your car, it's black, it's gritty, but it runs, right? It's liquid. We changed that to a Class A 95% dry product, which think Milorganite or dry dirt, that. And so Class A can basically go anywhere. Class B is a permitting, nightmare kinda. And not only that, but our fields that we were putting Class B on were disappearing. So the last time we hauled as a part of a annual routine, we were paying 2.5 cents a gallon, and we do about 3 million gallons. That's $75,000 a year. Right now, if we did the same thing, it's 3 times that. So we're up to $225,000 a year to haul liquid B or liquid Class B biosolids out, which is one of the reasons we could see it coming. So we're like, we got to avoid this cost if we can. Granted, we put in a $13 million project. There's a long payoff there, but that cost is going to continue to go up. Not only that, we could end up in an even worse point because we didn't pay landowners at that time. They took it as a nutrient source. So we were giving them the nutrient, which has a value, and we were paying a contractor to truck it, which is a very common practice in municipal wastewater. But there are wastewater treatment plants from hours away that were starting to hawk our fields and start paying farmers for it or paying landowners and paying more for their trucking. So that cost could double and triple again. And that's just an unstable environment to have no real knowledge that you're going to have an outlet for your biosolids. So Class A, anybody who's willing to pick them up, we've tried to work with one party at a time to say, you're the operation. When we call, you have to come. So you have to have a truck, you have to have land that it can go on, you have to have a use for it. But that's a pretty good outlet for us, knowing it'll go away.
Now, of course, the big thing in the news is the PFAS in wastewater ending up in farms. Has that been something that's affected your operations?
It may very well be the reason our last partner didn't want them anymore. Because it's yeah, you're right. Everybody knows about it. There is it's kind of a bit of a circular issue, right? We do work with landfills very frequently. They send us the leachate out of their landfills. That leachate is very high in PFAS. So we know it's in there, and we're certainly not in any position to claim it's not. If we ever needed our PFAS levels in our biosolids to go down, the first thing we'd have to do is shut down leachate from landfills, which isn't sustainable either because they need a place to send it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I think that in the end, what we're going to do is find that, there may just be some really, really specific record-keeping type things that go on related to biosolids and PFAS, but we are hopeful. I don't know exactly where we're at, but the polluter pays approach to this is one that all landfill operators, all wastewater treatment plants, all drinking water systems that have this in it, which we are very fortunate to be incredibly low, almost no detect, that we know where the responsibility is going to lie eventually, I hope, with the CERCLA exemption. So we're all hoping that makes it through. But yeah, there's definitely just by nature of what we do, there's definitely measurable PFAS in those solids, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You said they're measurable. Would something of like e-gauge allow us to kind of monitor that sort of thing? Like
No,
what's coming in?
E-gauge is just for power.
Just different software. Okay.
Yep,
So
yeah.
Would we have something to monitor that kind of thing? Like what's coming in? I know we got one for like phosphates and stuff.
Yeah, we don't do any in-house PFAS testing, and it's not cheap.
Okay.
So we do know the approximate levels of things that are coming in, because when we take in hauled-in waste, by truck or whatever, we occasionally take samples and send them off so we know.
Okay.
And they're pretty consistent. You know, that's not something that's going to change a ton every single time. So we have some ideas. Those concentrations I'm not aware of. Like
Okay.
I've heard them, I've seen them. I'm not familiar enough with them to know. They'd seem shockingly high, because what we're all used to talking about is drinking water, and those numbers, you know, are single-digit numbers a lot of times. These are not single-digit numbers. That's what I know, but I wouldn't be able to talk very informed about that in our biosolids. Or I could, but I'd probably be making some stuff up, you know.
Okay.
So yeah, but I can certainly look into that and give another little
Sounds like
report.
something maybe
Yeah.
looking at
You-
studying.
I mean, I also, it's an adjacent issue, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't know that it'd be easy to recommend or follow through on a recommendation to this commission on PFAS.
I'm
It
just
doesn't
thinking-
have a lot to do with sustainability, so
I'm
we can
thinking
talk
more-
offline
yeah.
about that, but yeah.
Long-term, what I'm thinking is, what we're seeing now with what's coming in for our wells is good, clean water.
Mm-hmm.
But we're losing our farm fields, let's say, that we're spreading on. And how would we know if our well had been impacted, I guess? Is that would be what I'm,
Yeah, because we're required to test for that.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, and we have monitoring upstream of our source of supply, so our goal is to catch it years ahead of time.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Years if possible, yeah. So I got a couple other things that are more like, hey, do we think about these things? The other ways that we get efficient are some other things that we do, like lift station replacement. We did, with this year, I think we're going to be up to 5 new lift stations in the last 5 years, replacing them. So you talk about sizing motors, you talk about, you know, what size pipe are you pumping through so that you're using the right pump and using the right motor and hitting an efficiency curve that makes sense. Those kind of things definitely pay off, but they're not at all like commonly discussed, right? When we talk municipalities and sustainability and stuff like that.
Nobody's talking about
Right.
lift station pumps.
Right. But it's important and it's relevant, stuff like that. The other one that I thought of is fiber optic networks. This is kind of interesting. So, you know, starting in 2009, we put in our first fiber optic network system in the city in order to connect city buildings to city buildings, right? And what we're doing when we're doing that is we're sharing resources. So, you know, PD and City Hall and Water Department and Fire 1, Fire 2 and Airport and Transit, we're all connected with fiber, which means that we don't all need our own phone system. We can share a phone system. We don't all need an internet connection. We share an internet connection. And, you know, those things that we all use can be commonly managed, which means hopefully our IT needs are less because you don't have that same thing duplicated at 9 different areas. And it's about 9 areas where we have a significant staff level, or that can even be 2. But, you know, when you have 2 people, you still need a phone and a computer, right?
Yep.
So that one is a not so obvious, really impactful thing that I think probably leans on financial sustainability as much as anything. But when you look at it, I mean, you could argue it in just about any realm of sustainability. We put in fiber to all the schools in 2021, I believe. And it was a $1.1 million project, and they paid that, they got the ROI on that in somewhere around 2 years. Just because of the lack of need to, lease fiber from other providers. And so there's a lot of things there that I think really point to, we're always looking, and it doesn't always look and feel like putting a solar panel on a roof, or buying an EV or something like that, but it's always making a difference. Because ultimately, when you can make an operation efficient and save money, you've got more money to put towards other things, and those things might be those solar panels, right? So just food for thought. And I get really deep into these conversations and always try to kind of check as to, we got to remember why. This is kind of the full circle of what we do. That building on the right is our newest water production and treatment facility, even though our next one's already in construction. But this is well 11, it's out past the airport. The big part of that building, that whole building's treatment. You can't even see the well in this picture. But the well on the left is actually, does anybody know why? Know what that is? So the well on the left is actually a monument now. I don't even think it's a working well. It's in London. It's at the site of the
the cholera outbreak?
Yeah, the cholera outbreak that was first mapped by Dr. Snow in 1854, the first epidemiologist. See, this is why we do all this stuff, right? And why we want to keep it efficient. No matter what efficient means or sustainable means, that's why we got to do this. Those lines stacking up are deaths in a single building. And just 8 short years after this was put out, you know what happened? Nope, 4 short years after this was put out, you know what happened? Yeah, that's when Stevens Point became a city.
Oh, wow.
So we got the opportunity to kind of build on the heels of this massive piece of knowledge, right? That's like, don't pump water where your sewers are running. It seems pretty obvious now, doesn't it? But it hasn't always been. And these efficiencies lead us to being able to allow dense development, right? You could never live in an environment like that without municipal utilities. Certainly have cholera, right? That's just how it would work. And we do it for industry, these are a couple of our bigger ones in the area, paper and beer. In the mid-90s, actually, the mill here switched to exclusively city water because their source of supply, which was down on McDill Pond, was so yellow it impacted the color of their paper. They had to put so much chemical in there to get the color out that they're just like, look, can you guys supply us water? And we're like, yeah.
That's crazy. How much do they take a day?
About half our water. If you average it out over 30 days, it's about 2 million a day. It's a little under half, but it used to be pretty close to half. It fluctuates. Back when we had a supply contract, it was an average of 2.25 million a day over 30 days. So they're still about there. Yep. This is one I like, and I always got to throw it in there because one of the things that it kind of keeps me grounded is the fact that we forget how fortunate we are to have the resources we do, and how some of the outreach we do in the way of philanthropy in the industry involves water and sanitation facilities in parts of the world that don't have them. And the educated community component of that always blows me away, because when they do these projects, that they're not thinking about sustainability when they're doing it, right? They're thinking about livability, right? And, but inevitably, when you go back a year or two later, the first thing they've done is built a school. And I just think that's really cool, and we're so far past that it's not even a consideration.
Right.
And we're thinking about things that have nothing to do with the most basic elements of this. But I'll get back to the kind of black and white of it here. So that's an E-gauge unit right there on the left. It's a little box. It's not much bigger than this phone. It's just a little taller, like this. And you put it near your main power feed and put some contact loops around your main power phases, and it gives you information like that. So where we've recently started wiring, that's not super visible. You'll see the red dot in the lower left. is the one that we have existing, and the 4 green dots are where I've just had data extended to, so that we can add these and plug them into our network and start getting these same graphs spit out.
Those are the wells.
So what you have, if you can see my mouse, this is our airport terminal, this is well 11, this is transit, and this is wastewater. I didn't do all the wells yet because well 11 is probably where we're going to be looking next at some renewable.
Okay.
Well 11's our lead well. It pumps steady all day long, which means that you can very accurately size something like solar or because when your consumption fluctuates a lot, it makes it harder to hit that target. But if we can hit something that's just perfectly sized, it makes our ROI better.
Yeah.
So we just size it to be perfect with that facility, and that facility is super predictable in power consumption.
Nice. So, at least with the e-gauges I've seen before, there is a link to access the data. Once the rest of these are online and functioning, could you share those links with the commission?
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, the
Awesome.
one we have out there is a public link.
Okay.
This
nice.
isn't my laptop, or I'd bring it up right now, but
Sure.
yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Cool.
That's actually my last slide. I'm hoping that's in the vein of what you were looking for tonight.
Yes, thank
Because
you.
being such a new commission, I didn't really know. But I will say this, if there's any part of this that you need more of, that you're curious about, I can certainly come back sometime in the future. You're going to run out of departments eventually. So that's what I've got. I appreciate you inviting me in tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Let's see, I had a couple of questions I thought of, and of course I'm blanking on one. The other one is I am just curious about the stormwater that, of course, we would all hope that we can mitigate the effects of climate change, but there will likely be some things that we have to adapt to. And of course, one of those things is likely to be more dramatic rainfall events. So kind of what are your, I don't know, thoughts, planning, what is the city capable of coping with at the moment? Do you have plans for how you would like that to change in the future?
Yeah, so I think we started addressing that maybe very intentionally, but also maybe kind of accidentally several years back. And we had a couple years of bad storms, and we had some flooding on the north side, 5th and Grant area, and east of there, so call it like Washington and 3rd-ish area too. And we set to resolving that. One of the things that happens over the years because you don't know exactly your pattern of development, one interesting thing in downtown Stevens Point is that a portion of our biggest storm sewer in downtown Stevens Point flows backward.
That's okay.
Yeah, and it's not. It's pretty easy to understand why. If again, sorry, this isn't my computer, so if something weird come up here. I'll show you why. Years ago, when Moses Creek was put into a pipe, in fact, a quick little trivia here, you are a North Sider if you live north of where Moses Creek used to be. That's where that term comes from. It's not just north of downtown. This little thing down here by Cultural Commons, this is the discharge side of what used to be a lift station that sat here to pump Moses Creek into the river because they've raised the head of this river 3 times. So 100 years ago, let me see, more. The last time they raised the head of the river, I think, was in the late 30s or mid 30s. So somewhere a little more than 100 years ago, Moses Creek flowed into the river by gravity. And then when they raised the river the first time that's why this became a slough. And there's old photos that you can find that have a huge slough here, because as the head of the river raised, that creek backed up. So there's a portion of that Moses Creek pipe, when it got buried in this area, that of course was constructed to flow to the river, because that's the way it flowed. And now, in the late 70s, we reconstructed the big pipe to come down this way and down Rogers Street, and ultimately flows down Wisconsin and discharges here below the dam. So where the head of the river is lower. So there's that stretch of pipe up in the Center Point and First area, generally in this area, that actually flows towards the river still, because that's how it was constructed. That isn't very productive from a stormwater conveyance. But we made some big improvements on this intersection at First and Center Point a couple years back, and actually corrected that, a good portion of it. So the portion where a lot of the flow goes through is corrected, but we still have some things to do, and we've been spending a lot of time and effort and money on the north side of town from a construction perspective for many years now. Part of that is to resolve surface water issues, flooding issues from rain. And so we're doing what we can. I'll say we don't have a design criteria that says, we'll resolve this, There is a lot of different things, standards, like not less than, say, a 25-year, but has to sometimes in a 100-year, and that kind of thing. We have designed storms that we try to accommodate. Nonetheless, there are these events that are going to happen that are just kind of unforeseeable, right?
Well, I think we have now had enough experience with climate change to say that very little is completely unforeseeable.
Yeah.
But
the difference,
yes.
So what's unique about stormwater is when we model a storm, there are specific storms from specific dates in history that we use to say it'll handle that one.
Good.
But will we ever have that one again? I don't know.
Yeah,
Because,
so-
when you get 2 inches over 6 hours versus 2 inches in 20 minutes or something, it's vastly different, right? And in fact, it doesn't, I'm really exaggerating the point. It doesn't have to, the length of time versus the amount of rainfall doesn't have to change that much for it to all of a sudden totally inundate a designed system that relies on pipes.
Yeah.
When you get to the areas where we have more overland flow, so more swales and ditches and stuff like that, in Point, we actually try to keep that water where it is a lot of the times because our soils infiltrate water so fast. But there are times when that'll be overcome too, or overwhelmed. So I don't have a great answer for you other than we are aware that the approach taken generations ago isn't going to work for generations to come. Yeah.
Yeah. I was in Middleton when the 1,000-year flood hit, and my family's house was on top of a hill, and we did not know that we did not have a backflow prevention valve on our septic tank, and so guess what we got to spend our evening cleaning out of our basement, despite the fact that we were on the top of a hill. And so that was kind of crystallizing in terms of, what kind of water level might we expect?
And I can tell you there is no design standard I've ever heard of that says account for the 1,000-year storm. They're just not there. We'd have 10-foot sewers everywhere, and we don't. We can't, right?
Yep.
We just can't do it. So we take the best approach we can at the reconstruction. We actually, in several areas in this part of town, have redirected in different directions and oversized pipes very commonly to accommodate the fact that we were surcharging and we were seeing surface flooding in events that were not as extreme as we want to be able to handle. So we're constantly improving.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the other question that I did remember, so as you're dealing with all this biogas, I've heard that one of the unfortunate tendencies of methane is it likes to escape. So is there any sort of, monitoring system or anything that is able to make sure that it's not leaving from where you
Yeah, it's just
don't
that.
want it to be anymore?
It's just that right there. So on the upper right, that's one of our flares.
Okay.
So you're not allowed to let unburned methane leave. You have to flare it. The impacts of it after it's burned are obviously not gone, but far less.
Yep.
But this is why we're making every effort we can to utilize the gas, because it's got a huge value. The BTU value of methane is essentially the same as natural gas, right? The BTU value of our biosolids after we're done with them is like 80% that of coal. So there's options there too, you know. Of course, if you start incinerating biosolids, you're losing the value they have for nutrients. So it's always, what do you do with it? But if the PFAS regulation starts getting too solid, what we're probably going to end up doing is incinerating it, right? So, yeah, that's what we do. We have 2 flares at the treatment plant, one on the older digester complex where you have those 3 round tanks, and then one by the new big one. So anything that comes, we have 2 floating covers. One is on digester 3 and one's on digester 4 to trap methane, because that's the only way we can store it to use it. You have to trap it somewhere. So those 2 covers combined hold, I believe, 50,000 cubic feet of methane. And when those are full, when they're all the way up, they're going to start, we're going to start losing methane. And so if we get to that point, these things have a constant sparker in them, and if methane's escaping, it sparks it and it flares, and we occasionally get calls that the treatment plant's on fire. It's not.
So yeah, any idea of kind of what the frequency is that a flare has to kick in?
Often.
Okay.
Yeah, because you ride that line of having full covers and you're using it, and it just gets to a point, or if our dryer's down, if we're not drying biosolids, because we do have periods where we shut it down for maintenance, periods where, you know, we like to go, I think most recently, I think we're running between like 6 and 10 weeks at a time or something like that. At first, we needed to shut down every 6 weeks, and we found out ways to push that a little longer, but we try to time those with things like Christmas, you know, shut down right before Christmas, because you're going to get called in, you know, that's just how it is. It's a 24/7 operation that we do not staff 24/7. We have first shift, but we are there 7 days a week. One guy's there on the weekend. So, you know, it's one of those things where, yeah, we will be flaring. I can say that I believe we probably flare less than a lot of places do for comparable sizes, because we use a lot of gas. But we're always looking for ways to use more. The issue is that the cost of the equipment, and this is where the financial sustainability comes in. If we were to want to put in a system that runs methane through a turbine, for example, well, what size turbine are you going to buy? And are you going to size it based on when your dryer's down and you're still making gas? Do you want to be able to burn all of that? You're going to end up with a bigger turbine, more expensive, longer ROI. You buy one that is so small that you could probably run it 24/7. It's going to have a better ROI. You're going to still flare gas, you know. So it's the same issue you run into with sizing solar.
Yeah.
It's like, what's ideal? Because we can't just throw endless amounts of dollars at it, but we can easily. We've always looked very favorably at investing in something that had a 7 to 10 year ROI, because that makes sense, because most equipment will last you 20 years, you know. So then you're on the right side of that financial equation. And then to get to some of the more sustainability-based goals, that's where, you know, different grants and stuff come in and make those numbers look better. That's why Focus has been so popular. That's why the Public Service Commission grants are so popular. So we gotta tie those together and do more. That's why if I were to make a pitch about the city and where we're going next, what they need is a budget. You know, you've got a lot of staff that know exactly what is the next project, the lowest hanging fruit out there, even though there's not a lot of low hanging fruit. But they need a budget, you know? So it's like, all right, at some point, does this commission get in the capital cycle? Do they get in, it's gonna be harder to get in the operational budget cycle. And this is really a capital intensive thing. So it's like, hey, do we ask for 200 grand a year and be able to, if we use 150 of that, roll over the other 50, so we have 250 the next year and do a bigger project, that would be, in my opinion, the most meaningful thing that could be done. Provide the resources and we'll get you projects.
And what would be your next project on the list?
Good question. The reason I'm looking at these 4 facilities is because, is because of the fact that they are the easiest for me to say these operations could benefit from something like a solar array. Well 11, which is the furthest to the top of the screen there, like I said, it's a huge power user, and it's very easy to appropriately size an array there. The airport, it's kind of an interesting one. I'm more interested in the data there because, you click up airport lights at night, right? Your usage is at night. Solar isn't as useful there, right? I mean, you're gonna...
Not unless you add the battery, too.
Yeah, right, exactly. But the good news is the battery becomes more feasible now because our main runway just got repaved and it's now got LEDs on it instead of incandescents. Okay. So our demand there isn't as high, and you could really pitch the idea of storage there. Yeah. And there's plenty of land for panels, I mean, look at all that land.
Yeah.
At wastewater, we do see a lot of wastewater treatment plants starting to look at solar to augment usage. And because we're staffed during the day, what we're very aware of our operation during the day. And then it's the type of thing where the goal is to have it steady through the night, right? Mm-hmm. In transit, is kind of different. It's a staffed operation, more hours than most in the city. Because remember, like in the weekends, we run late night. And even during the day, our normal routes end around 6:30. So we have several hours more occupied space than most administratively focused buildings in the city. It's not just an 8-hour thing, it's more like 12, right? Which means that you have more load on a building because people are there longer, which means that you can capture more benefit out of an array out there because it's being used more consistently through the same hours. And they happen to be daytime hours, a lot of it. So I think that I'd probably say very generically, I want to study which one of these is easiest to size and justify. But really some of the other stuff, I'm looking at installing maybe a charging station at the utility garage. We've got a little bit of the infrastructure there. There's some interesting programs for that, good grants for that. I do think, and I was just talking about it, I do think that we could really benefit and have some really good numbers come up by using our waste gas for some power generation in a way we haven't done before. That's going to heavily depend on a grant availability because it's not a 24/7 thing. Something like there are turbines you burn methane in, and those turbines ultimately end up with the same fate as our reciprocal engine did. They blow apart because it's dirty gas. That's ultimately how it goes. A different technology, like a steam-driven one, is not commonplace for our size. What we need is 300 kW or less. And you get into GE and all those big turbines, and they're not interested, right? They're talking 5 kilowatts, 1 kilowatt, or megawatt.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to find the technology, but they're developing. You got Rankine cycle, which is just an organic cycle, lower, I don't know what I'd say, it's not like a turbine, it's using waste heat more than anything to drive a cycle that you can then pull power off of. That could be something we use. There's a lot of options out there. And that's just this operation, utilities and transportation. There's a lot of other things in other parts of the city that I think that if what we were tasked with was to say, collectively, you guys have a few $100,000 to use, how are you going to use it? I think it'd be an interesting meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Joel, I'd give you kudos for looking at e-gauges at these locations. Coming from the solar industry, obviously, you know, we've worked together on these, but understanding what your power actually usage is key to all of that. And it's not, you don't generally get reliable data from the utility that you can action. You get very broad data, but you don't get that granular data that you really need to be able to pick your best spot to get your best ROI for those systems. So this is really smart.
Yeah. And you can't consume it as well. This is so easy to consume and just look at it and say, who's doing what right there? You know?
Yeah, it's not an 80,000 line Excel spreadsheet.
I have heard of some schools that, looking at their e-gauge data, found some cases where people were using electricity in ways and times that maybe they shouldn't have been.
Like I said, you don't know till you know.
Yeah, I have one at my house, and I can see when my kids get home and turn on their PlayStations instead of doing their homework. And then I get a text from Dad.
Yep. Yeah, so again, if there's anything that comes up that you want to hear a little more about in the future, I'm more than willing. I appreciate you having me down.
Thank you so much.
You bet, Joel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel.
Okie dokie. I suppose we can move on to agenda item number 7, which is the selection of a meeting date in July for a field trip visit of the Public Works facilities. I believe the last time I spoke with Greg, we were looking at the week of July 7th. Is that correct?
That sounds right.
Okay, and I'm good all those days. I can make whatever work, so I'm not picky.
Yep, I could not do before the week of July 7th, but I should be available any evening that week at 5:30.
Yep, would work for me too.
I can make whatever we got to for that sort of thing work. I'm going to be around here for the 4th of July stuff, so.
Do we just want to keep it on Thursday, just to be consistent, maybe?
Unless, did we have any other thoughts for, we had thought of doing that as the field trip.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess it's only the question of if anyone is planning to, like, leave Thursday night to travel somewhere for the 4th of July weekend, which,
Well, this would be after the fact.
Yep.
yeah.
So,
Oh, right, yes.
I know, I looked at that too. I was like, if we do have a meeting on the 3rd, I think I'll actually be able to make it now, because my travel plans changed a little, but,
Yeah. All right,
then that'd be July 10th then, correct?
that
What we're going
sounds
with?
right.
Okay, sounds good.
So you want a motion for the meeting on that day? Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, I guess let's take a motion, I suppose, and just to make it official.
I move that we meet in July on the 10th, the Thursday of the 10th at 5:30.
Perfect. I'll second that.
Okay.
Okey-doke. And then I guess all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, perfect. I don't know, I guess I'll just email Greg with our decision,
Sounds
and then he
good.
can just contact Director Badoon and all that,
Yeah,
because he's
looks
already
like he's been working with them on
Yeah,
that.
he's already been chit-chatting. So, okay, perfect, we can do that. And then, I guess our next meeting then is June 5th. We will have Dan Kremer, with Director of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, presenting to us. Does this mean that we're supposed to come up with some agenda, or come up with some different topics that we might want him to speak on? If anybody has any ideas, I guess not a bad idea. Just give him some direction. So far, I think everyone's been
Things
doing a good
that
job.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree.
things that, like, curious about, because like we just had a comprehensive plan that they had come out, and just because I see so much great work come out of their department there, especially in the last year. We got a solarized park, which is now the showcase as you come right through our city. Another EV charging station there down Kraholski Park.
I've used that, and my family has used that coming into town, so.
So I'm just kind of curious to see where more of that's coming online from them. There's a food forest now on Prairie Street, thanks to the Parks Department as well. Like, that's something that when I saw that, it was like, oh, excellent. Like, this is a thing that's making our city, say, not just like a greener space and more accessible for food. It's like, this is something we've talked about for a long time when it comes to nutritional accessibility and all that kind of thing. It's like all these synergistic things happening there. So I'm just excited to kind of like see where this sort of thing is coming online, and with their plan as well, is like they got some facility sort of needs. That's the Durkee Xenoff Park project thing. I'll be excited to see what's coming out of that here with the next meeting in May too, is because I was talking with somebody today. They're curious to know what the lighting situation is going to be, like what's this. So
Yeah.
just to kind of see where they're at, what they have for the short term, what they're looking at for projects that are going to be addressing our goals of meeting our climate commitment kind of thing, or excuse me, our greenhouse gas commitment climate. Yeah. But because they're doing a lot, I've seen that the forestry department's already got like quite a template to build off of when it comes to our greenhouse gas inventory, like how that can be kind of applied to other departments if there's a way to look at like how they've already done it. Those are just things that when I see the parks meeting coming up, I'm like, okay, these are some questions I'd like to know more about.
Sure.
What you guys?
I don't know, I guess, because kind of like Joel said, you don't know until you know. So like I said, I think all the staff has been doing a really good job presenting and just, telling us things that maybe we hadn't even thought about or whatever. So it'll just be good to have some background.
I think it's also good is each department then, as they present, they kind of give you what their lens of sustainability is and how it works within their department and what they're prioritizing. So I think that has been very helpful and very helpful to understand what each department is doing. So so I almost
wouldn't want to direct too much. I want them to just come to us with what they have, and then you got to go from there and ask questions and deep dive where you want more explanations. Right. So
what is the parks and forestry equivalent of right-sizing your lift station pumps?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what I want to know. Yeah. All right. I guess any more comment, discussion on that?
No.
Otherwise, the last agenda item, everyone's favorite, adjournment. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn for the evening.
I'll second that motion.
Beautiful. Then we are adjourned at 6:44. Yes!
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.